So our next speaker is Dr. Luka Powanga. He is currently at Regis University and a professor, but he's going to be talking more about his African energy projects and initiatives. He's the co-founder of the annual Energy Africa Conference and has a very long resume of accomplishments and achievements, but I'm going to cut that short to give it over to him to talk about energy and Africa. So with that, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here, and I would like to thank Sally and Chips and the rest of the team for inviting me. I'm going to talk about transforming Africa's energy access and supply. As you are all aware, you have seen this picture. For those who are in the energy business, you've seen this picture already. This was taken by NASA at night to try and look at how energy is being projected, or the degree of how much energy is in each of those countries. And what you will notice here is Africa is still in the dark. And what that means then is that we can drill that information and try to find out what are the numbers behind that. And if you look at that, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but if you look at Nigeria, for instance, 93 million people out of the 170 million people have no access to energy. If you look at Zambia, the country where I come from, it's only 16 million people, and yet 10 million people have no access to energy. If you look at South Africa, okay, it's got about 40 million people there. 8 million of those do not have access to energy. Look at Ethiopia, 70 million people don't have access to energy. Well, if you distill all that, you come to a number about 600 million people who have no access to energy. And to give you just an idea about how large that number is, you're looking at America has got about 300 million people. So 600 million people, it's double the size of America. Imagine everybody here in America not having any access to energy, and you double that number. Now, if you go down with those numbers, you'll see that actually if you look at the entire world, only 15% of the population doesn't have access to energy. And out of that 15%, if you drill down it, you'll find that sub-Saharan Africa has the most of those, has the biggest share of that number, 55%. And if you look at that number again, you see that 87% of those people are the ones in rural areas. So which means there is a large problem there. Now, overall, if you look at Africa then, you see that there is going to be an increase in demand of about 93% between today and 2035. Now think about that. We already are having problems meeting the current demand, and yet what we're saying here is we are going to expect a higher demand later on. And of course, the other information, I've already spoken about it. So, how do we get to the picture that I gave you earlier on, which was taken by NASA, to the picture where it would look like that, where Africa will become an economic model of how sustainable economic development looks like? And we have a great opportunity here. And this is the reason why you are seeing me here talking about it. Because Africa doesn't have the infrastructure that is worth talking about in terms of energy generation. We don't have factions. We don't have entities that are going to sit back and say, hey, you're talking about coal, don't touch my coal. That's how I make a living. Hey, you're talking about oil, that's how I make a living. We don't have that there. So what we have here is a clean slate that we can write good things on. And I would like us to write good things on that. So let's take a look at the current situation in terms of where Africa is right now. Well, one of the things about Africa is really big, it's really large. So you have a lot of countries, you have a lot of differences in terms of variations in culture, temperature, policies, and things of that nature. But in terms of the wealth, it's really very wealthy. You look at $114,000 worth of the subsoil assets. We're talking about minerals, oil, and things of that nature, compared with 23,000 per kilometer if you're looking at the rest of the world. That's a huge difference. And yet, Africa is not so well developed. It owns 60% of the world's arable land, and yet only 10% of that is actually cultivated. And I'm not talking about real cultivation here, because most of that, it consists of subsistence farmers, and those farmers don't really use the land as well as the commercial farmers. So that 10% could actually be enhanced if it came to that. And we know that the world population is actually increasing, which means we have more mouths now to put food into. So we're going to need Africa to step up. 50% of the world's minerals, they're from Africa, 40% of global gold from Africa, 80 to 90% global chrome and platinum metal groups, they're all from Africa. 10% of hydro is what has been developed, which means we've got 90% that we can develop. Looking at geothermal, only 1% has been developed. And solar, wind, those are not even in the picture because we haven't really touched them. Now, so how do we go about developing Africa? First, we have to ask ourselves, yes, we need megawatts to try and power Africa. But the question is, how should that megawatt look like? And how should we deliver that megawatt? So we have to have a common vision in terms of how do we want Africa from now on to look like. Let's say we look at Africa 20 years later. How should Africa look like? Once we have developed that common vision, then all the projects that we are doing can feed into that common vision. Right now, that is non-existent. All we know is we need megawatts. Okay, we do, but we haven't defined how those megawatts would look like. And two, we haven't even looked at, okay, the delivery. Are we going to use the same old methods that were being used in other countries and import them into Africa? That is not the way to do it. But it's going on right now. There are a lot of good things that are going on, a lot of organizations, well-meaning organizations, that are doing good business in Africa, but there hasn't been that coordinated approach to it, a holistic approach to it. As a result, you find somebody here, he finds an oil well and he starts developing that oil well. You go look there at the technology, it's what was being used 20 years ago in Texas. Why is that? And when you ask them, oh, no, it's very important for us to develop this area because if you delay, you're going to hurt the people. Well, you have to have other methods of doing it. I mean, as the saying goes, actually I'm borrowing this from one of the professors who said, well, the Stone Age did not end because people ran out of stones. It ended because they had other alternative means to now move forward with their lives. So the same thing here. Now, so now that let's say we develop a vision. What is the next step? The next step is we can learn a lot from, can't see the number. We can learn a lot from the telephone industry. Well, 20 years ago, if you went to Africa, well, you go to my country, Zambia, it will take you 5 years to get a telephone line. Assuming that you didn't have direct connection with the government, it would take you a day if you did. But if you didn't, it would take you about 5 years on the wait list. Now, if you go there to the most remote area of Zambia, you get your cell phone line right away, instantly. How did that happen? Well, two things happened. One is they moved away from the landlines and went on to the microwaves using satellites, and using cellular phones. Two, the cell phone that we are using, this is standardized. What we mean by standardizing is that now we can mass produce it, which will be much cheaper. So can we apply the same lessons to Africa in terms of energy? Yes, we can. There are a lot of technologies that are evolving that we can actually use as it is. So if we bring all those people with nice technologies, all those people that are forward-thinking, and we decide we should leapfrog these old technologies that we are using, because we have a lot of experience in terms of what these technologies have been used for, what their faults are, what their strengths are, so we can reap the good things. And those are the things that we can actually instill and deploy in Africa. And we will see the Africa that I highlighted Otherwise, beyond that, it's not, I mean, short of that, that's not going to happen. Now, what are some of the things that we should be doing? One of the things is de-risking the projects. Well, there is a lot of perception about how Africa looks like in terms of risk, in terms of corruption, in terms of delays in projects, in terms of people just wanting a handout and things of that nature. Well, we can leapfrog those things. We can get them out of the way by creating some kind of a collaboration where you're looking at America, I mean, companies that are doing projects in America and would like to do projects in Africa, and also identifying the projects here, and create some kind of a network where we know each other. We know the people at the end, and we know the people here, so that if you want to go to Africa and you want to make an appointment with a leader, you don't have to wait or make appointments here. The partner there is going to make the appointment, and they will make sure that that leader who needs to be there will be there. If you are negotiating, that person is going to be there to make sure that you are not being misled, or you're not being told false stories. So here we can de-risk those projects. And this is why the Energy Africa Conference comes in. So what do we do with the Energy Africa? Well, what we do is we have recognized that to make this happen, we have to have 3 different areas involved, or stakeholders. Those who are coming from the business community, those who are coming from the policy end, and those who are coming from the technology, the technical know-how. So we have to combine all these people, be in the same room, decide on how do we want to develop Africa, how do we want to use the technologies, and each one of these will tell us what kind of obstacles they have in terms of transforming Africa. And then we can work on reducing those barriers. Once we have those 3 people are on the same table and they decide on what is going to be done, then we can transform, and this is now the second phase, where we can now look at how do we actually deploy the ideas that we've learned about during the time when we had those discussions. And at that point, we are in a position to actually deploy a more efficient, I mean, a megawatt that is efficient, that is affordable, that is accessible, that is resilient. I know I've got a couple of minutes here. Just to end this up, if you look at what has happened now with Africa, right now there has been a lot of crisis in terms of energy. You look all the way from Sudan, I don't know if I can go back to, you look all the way from Sudan to South Africa, right? Look at the top, all the way from Sudan, all that area down to South Africa. All those have been affected by the drought. They depend so much on hydroelectric power. So their system that we have right now is not resilient. We need to create a system that is resilient. And this is where you come in. I would like to make sure that all those people who are interested, we get together so that once we start, when we identify these projects, we can identify the people who can put in the technology, the people who can put in the money, and the people who can actually deliver those projects in a timely fashion. And I will end it here.